Martha Calloway pressed her youngest daughter against her chest as the sixth man turned his back and walked away. 9 children. 9 reasons no one wanted her. The snow fell harder now, and her babies were shivering in clothes too thin for Wyoming winter. She had buried 2 husbands, survived 5 rejections, and traveled 400 miles for this moment. Now she stood alone on a frozen platform while the whole town watched her fail again. Then she heard hooves thundering through the blizzard and a voice that would change everything. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that subscribe button and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Martha's journey reaches across this world. The platform at Hawthorne Creek had seen desperate women before, but none quite like Martha Ann Calloway. She stood at the far end, her 9 children arranged around her like a protective wall she hadn't asked them to build. Samuel, her eldest, at 19, positioned himself slightly in front of his mother, his jaw set hard against the bitter December wind. Rebecca, 17, held baby Lily against her shoulder while keeping one hand on Grace's trembling arm. Martha had stopped counting the stairs 20 minutes ago. "Mama," little Joey tugged at her worn wool skirt. "Mama, I'm cold." "I know, sweetheart." Martha's voice came out steadier than she felt. "Just a little longer." She didn't believe her own words. 6 men had already walked down the line of waiting women, and 6 men had taken one look at her cluster of children and kept moving. Their faces told the same story every time. Interest flickering to calculation, calculation souring to dismissal. Too many mouths, too much trouble, too old. Martha Ann Calloway was 38 years old, and the frontier had taught her exactly what that meant. "That's the one." A woman's voice carried from the watching crowd, sharp and amused. 9 children, can you imagine? What kind of man would take on that burden? Samuel's shoulders went rigid. Martha touched his arm without looking at him. "Don't," she murmured. "It doesn't matter what they say. It matters to me. Samuel." Her voice carried the weight of years spent keeping this family together through impossible circumstances. "We need this. Don't give them reasons to throw us out." Her son's jaw worked silently, but he stayed still. The platform coordinator, a thin woman named Mrs. Pemberton, with spectacles perched on her nose, moved down the line with her clipboard. She'd been avoiding Martha's section for the past hour, as if hoping the problem would somehow solve itself. "Mrs. Calloway." The coordinator's voice was professionally neutral, but her eyes couldn't hide their pity. "I'm afraid the remaining gentlemen have made their selections. The afternoon coach leaves at 4 if you need transportation back to." "We're not leaving." The words came from Samuel, not Martha. Mrs. Pemberton blinked. "I beg your pardon?" "We're not leaving," Samuel repeated. "The registration said the selection continues until sunset. It's barely past 2. "Young man, I understand your situation is difficult, but my mother paid the registration fee same as everyone else." Samuel's voice didn't waver. "She has a right to stand here until sunset. That was the agreement." Martha felt something crack in her chest. Her boy, her firstborn, fighting for her dignity when she'd nearly forgotten she had any left. "Samuel." She placed her hand on his arm. "It's all right." "No, Mama, it's not." Mrs. Pemberton's lips pressed into a thin line. She looked at Martha, then at the children, then at the thinning crowd of townspeople who'd gathered to watch the bride selection like it was entertainment. "Very well," the coordinator said finally. "You may remain until sunset, but Mrs. Calloway, I feel obligated to tell you that in my 12 years coordinating these events, I have never successfully placed a widow with more than 3 children. 9 is simply impossible." Martha finished the sentence. "Yes, ma'am. I've heard that before." She'd heard it in Kansas City, where the first man had laughed in her face. She'd heard it in St. Louis, where the second man had offered to take her, but not the children. She'd heard it in 3 other towns, each rejection cutting deeper than the last. May I ask something, Mrs. Pemberton? The coordinator hesitated. Yes. In your 12 years, have you ever met a woman who buried 2 husbands and kept 9 children alive through drought, flood, and fever? Silence. Have you met a woman who walked 200 miles after her farm was taken, carrying a toddler while pregnant with her 9th child? Mrs. Pemberton's face had gone pale. Have you met a woman who can cook for 30 sew clothes from flour sacks, birth calves, butcher hogs, and teach children to read by candlelight because there was no money for a proper lamp? No, the coordinator whispered. No, I don't believe I have. Then perhaps impossible isn't the right word, ma'am. Perhaps you just haven't met the right man yet. Martha turned away before the coordinator could respond, gathering her children closer with practiced efficiency. Ruth was shivering badly now, her thin coat no match for the Wyoming winter. Here, Martha unhooked her own shawl and wrapped it around Ruth's shoulders. Share with Hannah. But Mama, you'll freeze. I'll be fine. I've survived worse than cold. Daniel, her 15-year-old, hadn't spoken since they'd stepped onto the platform 3 hours ago. He stood apart from his siblings, arms crossed, face closed off in that way that had become familiar since his stepfather died. Daniel, Martha said quietly, come closer. Share warmth with your brothers. What's the point? Her son's voice was bitter, brittle. We're going to fail again. We always fail. Daniel, it's true, isn't it? He finally looked at her, and Martha saw the scared boy beneath the anger. No one wants us. We're too much trouble. We should have stayed in Tennessee and died with dignity instead of dragging ourselves across the country begging men to... That's enough. Samuel stepped toward his brother. Don't talk to Mama like that. Or what, you'll hit me. Go ahead. Can't make things worse than they already are. Boys. Martha moved between them, her voice cutting through the tension. Stop, both of you. The watching crowd had grown quiet, their entertainment turning uncomfortable as the Calloway family drama unfolded before them. This isn't who we are, Martha said low enough that only her children could hear. We don't turn on each other. We've never turned on each other, not through anything. I won't let that change now. Daniel's jaw trembled. Mama, I'm sorry, I know. She touched his face, her cold fingers gentle against his cheek. I know, sweetheart. I'm scared too. You never look scared. That's because I'm your mother. It's my job to look like I know what I'm doing even when I don't. A small hand slipped into Martha's. She looked down to find Hannah, 9 years old, with her father's eyes and her mother's stubbornness. Mama, are we going to be okay? The question hung in the frozen air. Martha felt the weight of 8 other gazes pressing down on her, all of them asking the same thing without words. She knelt in the snow, heedless of her already soaked skirt, and gathered Hannah close. Do you remember what I told you when your papa went to heaven? Hannah nodded. You said we were like prairie grass. Storms bend us but don't break us. That's right. And what happened after the storm? We stood back up. We always stand back up. Martha looked at each of her children in turn, 9 faces that had kept her alive when everything else was stripped away. We are Calloways. We survive, and we do it together. Well said, ma'am. The voice came from behind her, deep and rough as uncut timber. Martha rose quickly, turning toward the sound. A man stood at the edge of the platform, snow covering his shoulders and dusting his dark hair. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of decades of physical labor. His face was weathered and hard-angled, but his blue eyes were fixed on Martha with an intensity that made her breath catch. I'm late, he said simply. Train got caught in the pass, rode the last 20 miles through that blizzard. Mrs. Pemberton rushed forward, her earlier resignation replaced by sudden alertness. Mr. Blackwood, we weren't certain you'd make it. The weather's just weather. The man called Blackwood stepped onto the platform, and Martha noticed how the crowd parted for him. How even Mrs. Pemberton's spine straightened in his presence. Told you I'd be here. I keep my word. His gaze swept across the remaining women on the platform. 3 young girls who'd been too shy or too plain to catch earlier attention, one nervous widow in her 20s, and Martha with her wall of children. Sir. Mrs. Pemberton moved closer, her voice dropping. I should inform you that the selection has been quite successful today. Miss Adelaide there is only 22 excellent domestic skills, and Miss Portman comes with a small dowry from her family. I can see for myself. Blackwood walked slowly down the line, taking his time. Martha watched him pause before each woman asking questions too quiet for the crowd to hear. She noticed things. The quality of his coat despite the trail dust covering it. The silver watch chain glinting at his pocket. The way his boots, though wet from snow, were clearly expensive. Wealthy then. Very wealthy, if the whispers she'd caught were true. He reached the nervous young widow and spoke with her for several minutes. Martha forced herself to look away, focusing on keeping her children calm, while her heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The last man. The last chance. The sound of footsteps in snow made her look up. Nathaniel Blackwood stood 3 feet away, studying her with those unreadable blue eyes. You're the one with 9 children. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Martha lifted her chin, refusing to apologize for her family. I am. Mrs. Pemberton says you've been rejected 6 times. That's correct. Why do you keep trying? The question caught her off guard. Men didn't usually ask why. They just said no. Because giving up isn't something I know how to do, Mr. Blackwood. I've tried. It doesn't stick. Something flickered across his face. Not amusement exactly. Something harder to name. Tell me about them. He nodded toward her children. All of them. Martha blinked. Sir, you want me to consider taking on a family of 10. I think I've got a right to know who they are. Names. Ages. What they can do. Behind her, Samuel stepped forward. My name is Samuel Calloway, 19 years old. I've been working as a ranch hand for 3 years. I can rope ride brand, and I've broken 16 horses on my own. Blackwood's attention shifted to the young man. Who taught you? My father, and then myself after he died. Your mother's first husband? Yes, sir. And her second? Samuel's expression tightened. He wasn't much for teaching. Didn't last long enough anyway. Blackwood nodded slowly, something like approval in his eyes. He looked at Rebecca next. I'm Rebecca. The girl's voice was steadier than Martha expected. 17. I help Mama with everything. Cooking, sewing, keeping the little ones in line. I can read and write better than most grown men I've met. Modest, too, I see. Modesty doesn't keep a family fed, sir. That earned an actual smile, brief, but genuine. One by one, he went through them. Daniel, 15, defensive and angry, admitting he was good with numbers and hated showing weakness. Ruth, 13, who whispered that she wanted to be a teacher someday, and then flushed red as if she'd said something shameful. Eli, 11, who puffed up his chest and declared he was the fastest runner in 3 counties. Hannah, 9, who studied Blackwood with suspicious eyes and asked if he was mean to children. Grace, 7, who hid behind Martha's skirts and said nothing at all. Joey, 5, who wanted to know if Blackwood had any horses and could he ride one. Finally, Blackwood looked at baby Lily in Rebecca's arms. How old? 2 years, Martha answered. Born 3 weeks after my second husband died. She ever know a father at all? No, sir, she never did. Blackwood was quiet for a long moment. The platform had gone utterly silent, the crowd leaning in to catch every word. Mrs. Pemberton looked like she might faint from the suspense. I've got one more question, Mrs. Calloway. Ask it. Why should I choose you? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Martha could have lied, could have promised to be a perfect wife, grateful and obedient, never causing trouble. That's what the other women had done, she suspected. Made themselves small and agreeable. But Martha Ann Calloway had spent too many years fighting to make herself small for anyone now. "You shouldn't," she said. Mrs. Pemberton made a strangled sound. "I'm not young," Martha continued. "I'm not pretty. I come with 9 children who eat too much and make too much noise and will turn your peaceful ranch upside down. My oldest son doesn't trust any man anymore. My 15-year-old is angry at the world, and my 7-year-old hasn't spoken to a stranger since her stepfather died." She took a breath. "I've got no money, no skills that matter to society, no family left to speak of. I've been rejected 6 times because every man who looked at me saw a burden too heavy to carry." "So why should I choose you?" Blackwood asked again. "Because I'm not asking you to carry us, Mr. Blackwood. I'm asking you to give us a chance to carry ourselves. My children aren't burdens. They're workers, thinkers, helpers, people who know what it means to struggle and how to keep going anyway." Martha stepped closer, close enough to see the winter sky reflected in his eyes. "You don't need a pretty young bride who'll wilt when things get hard. You need someone who's already survived hard and come out standing. That's me. That's us. And if you can't see that, then you're not the man we need anyway." The silence stretched. Someone in the crowd coughed. A child whimpered. Then Nathaniel Blackwood did something no man had done in all of Martha's 6 rejections. He smiled. "Ma'am," he said, "I own 20,000 acres of Wyoming territory, 4,000 head of cattle, 200 horses, and a house with 8 bedrooms that's been empty for 6 years. I've got more money than I know what to do with, and not a single soul to leave it to." He turned to look at her children, all 9 of them standing there in their worn clothes, with their frightened faces and their stubborn chins. "9 children isn't a burden, Mrs. Calloway. It's a blessing. Any fool who can't see that isn't worth your time." Martha's heart stopped. "You want to know why I was late today? I've been avoiding this platform for years. Every woman they showed me wanted my money or my name or the comfort of my ranch. None of them wanted to actually work alongside me and build something real." He looked back at Martha. "Then I hear about a widow who's been rejected 6 times because she won't abandon her children to make herself more marketable. A woman who walked 200 miles while pregnant. A woman who stands in the snow and tells me I shouldn't choose her because she won't lie to make herself sound better." He offered his hand. "Mrs. Calloway, I'm not looking for a decoration. I'm looking for a partner. Someone strong enough to help me run an empire and honest enough to tell me when I'm being a fool. You interested in the job?" Martha stared at his outstretched hand. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Men didn't choose women like her. They didn't look at 9 children and see possibility instead of problem. They didn't ride 20 miles through a blizzard and then offer partnership instead of charity. "Mama," Hannah's voice was tiny, hopeful. "Mama, is he real?" The question broke something loose in Martha's chest. "I don't know, sweetheart," she whispered. Then louder, "Mr. Blackwood, I need you to understand something before I take your hand." "I'm listening." "I've been married twice. Both times I was property. Both times I did what I was told and smiled when I wanted to scream. If that's what you're looking for, tell me now so I can save us both the trouble." "It's not. And my children come first. Always. If it ever comes down to choosing between them and you, it won't." "How can you be so sure?" Blackwood's expression softened slightly. "Because I lost a child once. My wife, too. I know what it means to protect what matters most, and I know the hell of failing. I won't ask you to choose between family and marriage. That's not partnership. That's tyranny." Martha felt tears burning behind her eyes. She refused to let them fall. "1 week," she said finally. "A proper courtship. You need to be sure about what you're taking on, and my children need to know you're not going to disappear on them. Fair enough? And if at the end of that week you change your mind, I won't. But if you do, Mrs. Calloway," Blackwood's voice was patient but firm, "I rode 20 miles through a blizzard because I gave my word I'd be here. I've built everything I have through stubbornness and refusing to quit. If you think a week of getting to know 9 children is going to scare me off, you don't know what kind of man I am." "No," Martha admitted. "I don't. That's why I need the week." "Then you'll have it." He offered his hand again. "Do we have an agreement?" Martha looked at her children one more time. Samuel standing ready to fight. Rebecca holding Lily close. Daniel watching with suspicion and desperate hope warring on his face. Ruth Grace. Hannah Joey. Eli. All of them looking at her with eyes that asked the question they couldn't voice. Is this real? Are we finally going to be okay? She took Nathaniel Blackwood's hand. We have an agreement. The platform erupted. Mrs. Pemberton actually clapped her hands together. The crowd buzzed with shocked whispers. Disbelief mixing with something that might have been admiration. She's got nerve, I'll give her that. Did you hear her told the richest man in the territory he shouldn't choose her? 9 children. 9. He must be out of his mind. Or maybe he's the smartest man here. Blackwood ignored them all, his attention fixed on Martha and her family. I've got a wagon and horses at the livery stable, he said. My foreman can drive you all out to the ranch. House is warm, food's waiting, and there are beds for everyone. Tonight? Martha's voice caught. You'd take us in tonight. Ma'am, you've got a 2-year-old and it's 15 degrees outside. I'm not leaving any of you in town overnight. He crouched down to Joey's level. What do you say, son? You asked about horses earlier. Want to come see 300 of them? Joey's eyes went huge. 300? Give or take. You any good at counting? I'm learning my numbers Mama's teaching me. Then maybe you can help me count them tomorrow. Make sure none wandered off. Joey turned to Martha, practically vibrating with excitement. Mama, can we please? She couldn't speak. Her throat had closed around a knot of emotion she couldn't identify. Hope, maybe. Or fear. Or the terrifying combination of both that came from wanting something desperately after years of training yourself to stop wanting anything at all. Mr. Blackwood. Samuel stepped forward, placing himself between the rancher and his mother. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. Why her, why us? You could have your pick of any woman in the territory. Young, pretty, no complications. Why choose the hardest option? Blackwood straightened, meeting Samuel's challenging gaze with calm certainty. Because easy options build easy lives, and I've never been interested in easy. He looked at Martha over Samuel's shoulder. I watched your mother stand on this platform for 3 hours in freezing weather. I watched 6 men walk past her, and I watched her refuse to break. Do you know how rare that is? It's just stubbornness, Samuel muttered. No, it's strength. Same strength that walked 200 miles. Same strength that buried 2 husbands and kept 9 children alive. That's not stubbornness, boy. That's survival. And where I come from, survival is worth more than all the pretty faces and comfortable dowries in the world. Samuel stared at him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. If you hurt her. I know. There's not enough land in Wyoming to hide me. Something passed between them. Not friendship, not yet, but understanding. Mrs. Calloway. Blackwood offered Martha his arm. Shall we get your family out of this cold? Martha took his arm, her body moving before her mind could catch up with everything that had happened. They walked off the platform together, 9 children trailing behind them, like ducklings following their mother. The crowd parted still, whispering, still staring. Martha kept her eyes forward and her spine straight, refusing to let them see how badly her legs were shaking. At the edge of the platform, she paused and looked back. Mrs. Pemberton stood where they'd left her clipboard, clutched to her chest, expression caught somewhere between shock and wonder. Mrs. Pemberton, Martha called out. Yes. You said in 12 years you'd never successfully placed a widow with more than 3 children. That's correct. Martha smiled. It felt strange on her face after so many years of forgetting how. I believe your record just changed, ma'am. She turned and walked into the falling snow. Nathaniel Blackwood's arm steady under her hand, her children gathered close around her, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Martha Ann Calloway allowed herself to imagine a future where survival wasn't enough. Maybe, just maybe, she could have something more. The blizzard had stopped. The sun was breaking through the clouds. And somewhere in the distance, warmth was waiting. The wagon jolted over frozen ruts, and Martha tightened her grip on baby Lily, while scanning the faces of her children huddled beneath borrowed blankets. Blackwood had produced the blankets from somewhere thick wool that smelled of cedar and horse, and distributed them without ceremony or expectation of gratitude. That small act of practical kindness unsettled Martha more than anything else he'd done. How much further? Daniel's voice cut through the silence, sharp with the skepticism he'd worn like armor since his stepfather's funeral. About 4 more miles. Blackwood rode alongside the wagon on his bay stallion close enough to be heard over the creak of wheels and the steady clop of hooves. Ranch house sits in a valley, protected from the worst winds. Convenient. Daniel. Martha's warning was quiet but firm. It's a fair question. Blackwood didn't seem offended. Boy wants to know if I'm telling the truth or painting pretty pictures. Smart instinct. Keeps you from getting hurt. Daniel's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. In the wagon bed, Ruth had drawn Grace and Hannah close the 3 girls, forming a knot of shared warmth. Joey had fallen asleep against Samuel's shoulder, exhausted from the cold and the emotion of the day. Eli sat rigid and watchful, his 11-year-old mind clearly working through calculations Martha couldn't guess at. Rebecca caught Martha's eye and tilted her head slightly toward Blackwood. A question without words. Martha shook her head. She didn't know either. Mrs. Calloway. She turned toward Blackwood's voice. Your children haven't eaten since this morning. There's bread and dried meat in the saddlebag behind you. Not much, but it'll hold them until we reach the house. Martha hesitated. Accepting charity had never come easily to her, even when her children were hungry. It's not charity, Blackwood said, reading her pause with uncomfortable accuracy. It's practical. Hungry children get sick faster in cold weather. I'd rather feed them now than nurse them through fever later. That's a very logical way of looking at it. I'm a very logical man. Martha found the saddlebag and distributed the food. Watching her children eat, watching the color slowly return to their faces, she felt something loosen in her chest. Thank you, she said quietly. Blackwood nodded once, acknowledging the words without making them into something larger than they were. They rode in silence for another mile before Samuel moved his horse closer to Blackwood's. Martha watched her son study the older man with the measuring gaze he'd developed since becoming the family's protector. You said you lost a wife. Blackwood's expression didn't change. I did. How? Samuel. Martha's voice held warning. It's all right. Blackwood kept his eyes on the horizon. Childbirth, 6 years ago. The baby didn't survive either. Samuel absorbed this. I'm sorry. So am I. Is that why you never remarried until now, I mean? Partly. Blackwood glanced at the young man. Mostly I never found anyone worth the risk. Loving someone means you can lose them. After Eleanor, I wasn't sure I had it in me to try again. What changed? Time. And the realization that being alone to avoid pain is still pain, just a different kind. Samuel was quiet for a long moment. Then, my father was a good man. He taught me everything I know about ranching. When he died, I thought I'd never stop being angry. Did you? No. But I learned to carry it differently. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe. The understanding of men who'd been forced to grow up before they were ready. Martha watched the exchange with her heart in her throat. Samuel hadn't talked about his father in years. Hadn't let anyone close enough to hear the grief he still carried. There. Blackwood pointed toward a break in the trees. Blackwood Ranch. The wagon crested a small rise, and Martha heard Rebecca gasp beside her. The ranch spread across the valley like a small kingdom. A large white house dominated the center, 2 stories of solid timber, with green shutters and a wraparound porch. Smoke rose from 3 different chimneys. Surrounding it were barns, stables, bunkhouses, and corrals containing more horses than Martha had ever seen in one place. "Mama." Hannah's voice was barely a whisper. "Mama, is that real?" "I think so, sweetheart." "It's so big." "Yes, it is." Blackwood rode ahead to alert the household, and by the time the wagon pulled into the main yard, people had gathered to meet them. Martha counted at least 15 men standing in clusters, their curiosity poorly hidden behind neutral expressions. A man in his 50s stepped forward as Blackwood dismounted. Weathered and bow-legged, he had the look of someone who'd spent his entire life on horseback. "Boss?" His eyes moved to the wagon, taking in Martha and her children with obvious surprise. "You found one, then?" "I found 10 Hank, Mrs. Calloway, and her 9 children." Hank's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline. "9. Blackwood turned to help Martha down from the wagon seat. His hands were strong and steady at her waist. "Mrs. Calloway, this is Hank Morrison. Been my foreman for 20 years. Anything you need to know about this ranch, he can tell you." Martha extended her hand. "Mr. Morrison?" Hank took it after a moment's hesitation. His grip was firm, his palm calloused. "Ma'am, welcome to Blackwood Ranch." Behind her, the children were climbing out of the wagon, their movements stiff from cold and cramped muscles. Martha turned to count them automatically, a habit born from years of keeping track of too many small bodies. "All here?" Blackwood asked. "All here." She couldn't keep the surprise from her voice that he'd noticed her counting. "Good. Let's get everyone inside before they freeze solid." The front door opened and a Chinese man emerged, shorter than Martha, but with sharp eyes that missed nothing. His apron was stained with flour, and he carried himself with the authority of someone who ruled his domain absolutely. "Mr. Blackwood." His English was accented but clear. "You bring guests. Many guests. This is Mrs. Calloway and her children Cookie. They'll be staying with us." Cookie's gaze swept over the group, pausing on each child in turn. His expression gave nothing away, but Martha thought she saw something flicker in his eyes when they reached baby Lily. "Children need food," he said finally. "Hot food. Come." It wasn't a suggestion. Martha found herself herded toward the house, along with her brood Cookie, moving them with the efficiency of someone used to managing chaos. The interior of the house hit her like a physical force, warm air rushing against her frozen skin. "This way. Kitchen is warm. Children eat first, questions later." The kitchen was enormous. A massive stove dominated one wall, radiating heat that made Martha's fingers ache as feeling returned. Cookie pointed to a long wooden table surrounded by chairs. "Sit. All of you. Sit." The children obeyed without protest, too cold and tired to argue. Even Daniel slid into a chair without complaint, his teenage defiance temporarily suspended by the promise of warmth and food. Cookie moved through his space with practiced grace, producing bowls and spoons, and a pot of something that smelled like heaven. "Stew," he said, ladling generous portions. "Made for cowboys, but children need it more. Eat slow. Stomachs are cold. Too fast makes you sick." Joey took one bite and his eyes went wide. "Mama, this is the best thing I ever tasted." "Manners, Joey." "Thank you, sir. This is the best thing I ever tasted." Cookie's stern expression softened slightly. "Good boy. Polite. Mother taught you well." Martha watched her children eat, really eat for the first time in weeks. The stew was rich with meat and vegetables, the kind of meal she hadn't been able to provide since before they'd lost the farm. "You're not eating." She turned to find Blackwood standing in the kitchen doorway watching her. "I wanted to make sure they were settled first." "They're settled." He took the chair across from her as Cookie silently placed a bowl in front of each of them. "Eat, Mrs. Calloway. You're thinner than you should be." "That's not exactly polite to say to a lady." I'm not known for my politeness. Despite everything, Martha felt her mouth twitch toward a smile. I'm beginning to notice that. She ate. The stew was as good as Joey had declared better, even warming her from the inside out. Across the table, Blackwood ate steadily, his attention moving between Martha and her children. The boy who doesn't talk. He nodded toward where Grace sat pressed against Rebecca's side, mechanically lifting her spoon. She's not spoken since we met. Is she able to? She can talk. She chooses not to strangers anyway. Since when? Martha hesitated. Since her stepfather died. She saw it happen. A horse kicked him. He was alive one moment and gone the next. She was standing right there. Blackwood's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. She needs time. Yes. She'll have it. No one here will force her to speak before she's ready. The simple statement delivered without fanfare or expectation of gratitude made Martha's throat tighten. Mr. Blackwood, Nathaniel, or Nate if you prefer, we're going to be living under the same roof. Formality seems unnecessary. Nathaniel. The name felt strange on her tongue. Why are you being so kind to us? I'm not being kind. I'm being practical. That's the second time you've said that. Because it's the truth. He set down his spoon, giving her his full attention. I need someone to help me run this household. You need a home for your children. This isn't charity. It's mutual benefit. Most men wouldn't see 9 children as beneficial. Most men are fools. The words hung between them, simple and stark. Martha studied his face, looking for the trick, the hidden angle. The thing that would reveal this was all too good to be true. You're waiting for the catch, Nathaniel said. Can you blame me? No. But there isn't one. I told you what I want. A partner who can work beside me and tell me when I'm wrong. That's it. Everything else we figure out as we go. And if we don't suit each other, then at the end of the week you leave with whatever resources you need to start over somewhere else. No strings, no obligations. Martha wanted to believe him, wanted it so desperately that the wanting itself was terrifying. Mama! Hannah appeared at her elbow, finished eyes drooping with exhaustion. Mama, I'm tired. I know, sweetheart. We'll find bed soon. Already done. A woman's voice came from the doorway. Martha turned to find a young woman in her late 20s, fair-haired and pleasant-faced, with the kind of practical competence that radiated from every gesture. Mr. Blackwood sent word ahead. I've prepared rooms for everyone. Mrs. Calloway, this is Clara Morrison, Hank's daughter. She's been managing the house since... Nathaniel stopped. Since Mrs. Blackwood passed, Clara finished gently. I'm happy to help however I can, Mrs. Calloway. There are 5 bedrooms upstairs besides Mr. Blackwood's. Should be enough room for everyone if the children double up. Martha rose, her legs unsteady from exhaustion and warmth. Thank you, Miss Morrison. That's very kind. Clara, please. The young woman smiled. And it's not kind. It's practical. 9 tired children make for a difficult evening if they don't get to bed soon. There was that word again. Practical. Martha gathered her children and followed Clara up a wide staircase to the 2nd floor. The bedrooms were larger than any they'd slept in, with real beds and thick quilts and windows that looked out over the snow-covered valley. Girls can share the 2 rooms on the left, Clara suggested. Boys on the right, unless you'd prefer different arrangements. That's perfect. Martha watched Rebecca and Ruth guide the younger children into rooms, their movements gentle despite their own exhaustion. Miss Morrison, Clara, I don't know how to thank you. Thank me by getting some rest. Tomorrow will be busy enough. Clara paused at the door. Mrs. Calloway, for what it's worth, I think Mr. Blackwood made a good choice. This house has been too quiet for too long. She left before Martha could respond. The children settled quickly, exhaustion overcoming any excitement about their new surroundings. Martha moved from room to room, tucking blankets, kissing foreheads, murmuring the reassurances she'd been giving for 19 years. "Mama." Ruth's voice caught her as she was leaving the girls' room. "Yes, sweetheart. Is this real? Are we really going to live here?" Martha sat on the edge of the bed, smoothing her daughter's hair back from her face. "We're going to try Ruth. That's all I can promise right now." "He seems kind, Mr. Blackwood. He seems practical." Ruth smiled sleepily. "Maybe that's better than kind. Kind can disappear, practical stays." Out of the mouths of children, Martha thought. She found Samuel and Daniel in the boys' room, Joey and Eli already asleep between them. Her two oldest sons sat on opposite beds, the tension between them obvious in the rigid set of their shoulders. "Boys." Martha closed the door behind her. "Talk to me." "Nothing to talk about." Daniel's voice was flat. "Daniel." "He's being stubborn." Samuel cut in. "Refuses to see that this might actually be something good." "Good?" Daniel's laugh was bitter. "We've been here 2 hours. You don't know anything about this man. I know he rode 20 miles through a blizzard to get to that platform. I know he fed us and gave us blankets and brought us to a house with warm beds and more food than we've seen in months. What more do you want?" "I want to know why." Daniel turned to Martha, his young face hard with fear, disguised as anger. "Why us, Mama? Why would a man like that choose us when he could have anyone? There has to be a reason." Martha sat down between her sons, taking one of each of their hands. "Maybe the reason is exactly what he said. Maybe he wanted a partner, not a pretty face. That's not how the world works. Maybe it is here." Daniel pulled his hand away. "You don't believe that. You can't. After everything we've been through, you can't honestly believe that someone's just going to give us a good life out of the kindness of their heart." "I believe—" Martha paused, searching for words that would reach her angry, wounded son. "I believe that we've survived terrible things. I believe that survival counts for something. And I believe that if there's even a chance this man is who he claims to be, we owe it to ourselves to find out. And if he's not, then we leave. We survive. We try again. It's what we do, Daniel. It's what we've always done." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller, younger than his 15 years. "I'm scared, Mama." "I know, sweetheart. So am I. You don't look scared. That's because I've had a lot of practice hiding it." She pulled him close, feeling him resist for a moment before his body sagged against hers. Her angry boy, her difficult son, who'd taken his stepfather's death harder than any of them, because he'd been starting to trust again. "1 week?" she murmured against his hair. "Give him 1 week. If at the end of it you still think we should leave, we'll talk about it. But give him the chance first." "Can you do that for me?" Daniel nodded against her shoulder. Martha kissed both her sons, checked on the sleeping younger boys, and finally stepped into the hallway. The house was quiet now, the kind of settled silence that came with everyone finding their place for the night. She should sleep. Her body ached with exhaustion, her mind foggy from too many emotions in too short a time. But something pulled her downstairs instead, some need to understand this place she'd brought her children to. The main floor was dimly lit, only a few lamps still burning. Martha moved through rooms she hadn't properly seen before. A parlor with comfortable furniture. A dining room with a table large enough to seat 20. A study lined with books that made her fingers itch to touch them. And everywhere signs of a life interrupted. A woman's shawl draped over a chair. A vase of dried flowers on a mantel. A piano in the corner that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. She loved that piano. Martha spun to find Nathaniel standing in the study doorway, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding. This is going to be your home. You should know what you're walking into." She turned back to the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. She played beautifully, said it was the one thing that kept her sane out here. He moved into the room, settling into a chair by the fireplace. Do you play? I used to. Before my father sold the piano to pay debts. That was 20 years ago. There's sheet music in the bench. If you want to try again sometime. Martha pulled her hand back as if the keys had burned her. I should sleep. Tomorrow. Tomorrow will come whether you're ready for it or not. Sit down, Mrs. Calloway. You look like you're about to collapse. She sat because her legs gave her no choice, sinking into the chair across from his. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows across the walls. Your boy Daniel. Nathaniel's voice was thoughtful. He hates me. He doesn't hate you. He's afraid of you. Same result. No. Hate can't be fixed. Fear can. Nathaniel considered this. What happened to his stepfather, the one your daughter saw die? Martha stared into the fire. Frank Calloway, my husband Thomas's younger brother. When Thomas died, Frank married me to keep the farm in the family. It's common enough, practical. You said that word like it tastes bitter. Because it does. Frank wasn't cruel. He wasn't kind either. He just was. He did his duty by me and my children, and I did mine by him. When the horse kicked him, I felt a lot of things. Grief wasn't one of them. And your children? The older ones understood. They'd lived through the same marriage I had, but Grace. Martha's voice caught. Grace was only 5 when Frank came. She didn't remember Thomas. Frank was the only father she knew. When he died, she stopped talking, stopped trusting. And Daniel? Daniel was 11 when Thomas died. Old enough to remember what a good father looked like. He tried so hard to accept Frank, to give him a chance. When Frank died, I think part of Daniel decided that caring about men was too dangerous, that it was better to hate them than to risk loving them and losing them. Smart kid. Too smart, and too hurt. They sat in silence for a while, the fire slowly burning down. Martha felt weariness pulling at her, but the conversation wasn't finished. I need to ask you something, she said finally. Ask. There's a portrait in the hallway, a woman with dark hair. Nathaniel's expression shuddered. Eleanor. Your wife. Yes. You kept her portrait up. I wasn't going to hide her, pretend she never existed. I'm not asking you to. I just... Martha struggled to find the right words. I need to know what you expect. Am I meant to replace her? To become a new version of the woman you lost? Nathaniel was quiet for so long that Martha thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Eleanor was 19 when I married her. Beautiful, gentle, completely unprepared for life out here. I loved her, and that love blinded me to how much she was struggling. By the time I understood, it was too late. She'd already started to fade. He drained his glass and set it aside. I don't want you to be Eleanor Mrs. Calloway. I don't want you to replace her or live up to her memory. I want you to be exactly who you are. A woman who survived things that would have broken most people. A woman who raised 9 children through impossible circumstances. That's who I chose on that platform. That's who I want in this house. Martha felt tears burning behind her eyes. She blinked them back. And if I fail, if I can't manage this household, or learn to ride properly, or fit into your world, then we figure it out together. That's what partnership means. The clock on the mantel chimed midnight. Martha rose, her body finally surrendering to exhaustion. Good night, Nathaniel. Good night, Mrs. Calloway. Martha. The word came out before she could stop it. If we're going to be partners, you should call me Martha. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. Good night, Martha. Sleep well. Tomorrow we start building something new. She climbed the stairs slowly, her mind full of the conversation they'd just had. At the top, she paused to check on her children one more time. all sleeping, all safe, all warm. In the hallway, Eleanor Blackwood's portrait watched her from its frame. Dark hair, gentle eyes, a smile that held secrets Martha would never know. "I'm not here to replace you," Martha whispered to the painted face. "But I am here, and I'm going to take care of him. I'm going to take care of this house. If you're watching from somewhere, I hope that's enough." The portrait didn't answer. Portraits never did. Martha found the room Clara had prepared for her, larger than anywhere she'd slept in years, with a real bed and thick blankets and a window that looked out over the snow-covered valley. She lay down without undressing, too tired to do more than pull the quilt over her body. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Tomorrow she would have to prove herself worthy of this chance. But tonight, for the first time in longer than she could remember, Martha Calloway fell asleep without fear gnawing at her edges. Her children were safe. Her children were warm. Her children were fed. Everything else could wait until morning. 3 days passed in a blur of discovery and adjustment. Martha woke each morning before dawn, habit ingrained from years of having too much to do and too few hours to do it. But here in this strange new world, she found Cookie already in the kitchen, producing breakfast with the efficiency of a man who'd been feeding cowboys for decades. "You rise early," Cookie observed on that third morning, sliding a cup of coffee toward her without being asked. "Old habit." "Good habit. Ranch doesn't wait for sleepers." He cracked eggs into a massive skillet. "Your children sleep well." "Better than they have in months." "Good food, warm beds, simple things, most important things." Martha wrapped her hands around the coffee cup, letting the warmth seep into her bones. "Cookie, can I ask you something?" "You already asking." "How long have you been here at this ranch?" 15 years. Mr. Blackwood found me in Sacramento. I was cooking in a mining camp. Bad food, bad men, bad pay. He offered better. I came. Just like that. Cookie turned from the stove, his dark eyes sharp with intelligence. "Mrs. Calloway, when a man offers you something better than what you have, you take it. You don't ask why until later. You already know this. You came here." "I came here because I had no other choice." "No. You came here because you made a choice. Different thing." He returned to his cooking. "Mr. Blackwood is good man. Hard but good. Give him time. Give yourself time. Good things don't happen fast." Before Martha could respond, footsteps thundered on the stairs, and Joey burst into the kitchen like a small explosion of energy. "Mama, Mr. Blackwood says he's going to teach me to count the horses today. Can I please? He said I could sit on the fence and count them when they come out of the barn." Martha caught her son smoothing down his sleep-wild hair. "Did you say good morning first?" "Good morning, Cookie." "Good morning, Mama. Can I count the horses?" "After breakfast. And after you wash your face and brush your hair." Joey was gone before she finished the sentence, his excited voice echoing up the stairs. "That one!" Cookie said, a rare smile crossing his face. "That one has fire." "Too much fire sometimes." "No such thing. Fire keeps you warm. Fire keeps you alive. Better too much than not enough." The morning routine had already begun to take shape. Rebecca helped Cookie with breakfast while Ruth set the table. Samuel and Daniel ate quickly and headed out to work with the ranch hands, an arrangement Nathaniel had suggested on the second day. "They need purpose," he'd said simply. "Idle boys find trouble. Working boys find direction." Martha had watched her sons leave each morning with mixed feelings. Samuel seemed to thrive, his natural skills with horses earning respect from the other hands. Daniel remained withdrawn, doing what was asked, but nothing more, his walls firmly in place. "Mrs. Calloway." Clara Morrison appeared in the kitchen doorway, her expression carefully neutral. "Mr. Blackwood asked me to let you know that he's planned a trip to town this afternoon. He thought you might want to accompany him." Martha's stomach tightened. Town meant people. People meant judgment. "I'll go." "Are you certain? The weather looks threatening and—" "I said I'll go." Clara nodded slowly. I'll have the children ready to stay here with me. Cookie and Hank will help keep them occupied. Thank you. The ride to Hawthorne Creek took nearly 2 hours, the wagon moving slowly over snow-packed roads that had turned treacherous in the fluctuating temperatures. Martha sat beside Nathaniel, wrapped in the thick wool coat he'd insisted she take from the hall closet. It was Eleanor's, he'd said when she hesitated. No use in it sitting there doing nothing. She'd want someone to get use from it. The coat was warmer than anything Martha had owned in years, and she tried not to think about the ghost of another woman wrapped around her shoulders. "What do we need in town?" she asked, breaking the silence that had stretched between them. "Supplies. I need to meet with the bank about some land purchases. And," he paused, "you should be seen." Seen. Word's already spread about our arrangement. People are talking. Better they see you standing beside me than hiding at the ranch. Gives them less room to invent stories. You think they'll accept me? Nathaniel's jaw tightened. I think they'll learn to, or learn to keep their opinions to themselves. The town appeared through the gray afternoon light, and Martha felt her spine straighten automatically. She'd spent too many years making herself small in the face of judgment. That had to stop. The main street was quiet, most sensible people staying indoors against the bitter cold. But faces appeared in windows as the wagon rolled past, and Martha saw the curtains twitch with curious eyes. "Just keep your head up," Nathaniel said quietly. "Don't give them ammunition." They stopped at the general store first. The proprietor, a balding man named Henderson, greeted Nathaniel with the deference reserved for wealthy customers. "Mr. Blackwood, good to see you. Didn't expect anyone out in this weather." "Needed supplies, Henderson. This is Mrs. Calloway. She'll be staying at the ranch." Henderson's eyes flickered to Martha, and she saw the calculation happening behind them. The quick assessment, the barely concealed curiosity. "Ma'am?" He nodded. "Welcome to Hawthorne Creek." "Thank you." They moved through the store, Nathaniel pointing out items, while Martha tried to learn the layout. She was examining bolts of fabric when a voice cut through the quiet. "Well, so the rumors are true." Martha turned to find a woman of perhaps 50 standing near the entrance wrapped in furs that probably cost more than Martha had earned in her entire lifetime. Behind her stood a younger woman, blonde and delicate, with wide blue eyes fixed on Nathaniel. "Mrs. Hawthorne." Nathaniel's voice was carefully neutral. "Miss Hawthorne?" "Mr. Blackwood." The older woman moved further into the store, her gaze raking over Martha with unconcealed disdain. "When I heard you'd finally chosen a bride, I assumed the stories were exaggerated. A widow with 9 children? Surely not. But here she is. Mrs. Calloway, this is Priscilla Hawthorne and her niece, Miss Sarah Hawthorne. Priscilla's late husband founded this town, which gives me a certain responsibility for its moral character." Priscilla's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Tell me, Mrs. Calloway, wherever did you find 9 children? That seems excessive even for frontier women." Martha felt heat climb her neck, but she kept her voice steady. "I birthed them, ma'am. 7 from my first husband, 2 from my second. It's the traditional method." Someone near the back of the store coughed to cover a laugh. Priscilla's expression hardened. "And both husbands dead. How unfortunate for them." "Priscilla." Nathaniel's voice carried warning. "I'm simply making conversation, Nathaniel. After all, you've been a recluse for 6 years, and now suddenly you appear with this woman and her army of offspring. People are going to have questions." "People can keep their questions to themselves." "Can they?" Priscilla stepped closer, her voice dropping but still carrying in the quiet store. "Sarah has been waiting patiently for years, Nathaniel. She would have made an excellent wife. Young, pretty, from a good family. Instead, you choose a worn-out widow who couldn't even keep her previous husbands alive." The words hit Martha like physical blows. She'd heard worse, had survived worse, but something about the public humiliation, the casual cruelty delivered in a civilized tone, made her hands shake. "That's enough!" The voice came from behind her. "Daniel, Her son had entered the store without her noticing, and now he stood rigid with fury, his young face flushed with rage. "Daniel!" Martha reached for him. "Don't." "No." He stepped forward, putting himself between his mother and Priscilla Hawthorne. "You don't get to talk to her like that." Priscilla's eyebrows rose. "And who might you be?" "I'm her son, and I'm telling you to shut your mouth before I shut it for you." "Daniel." Martha grabbed his arm. "The boy has spirit." Nathaniel's voice cut through the tension. "Misguided but understandable." Daniel stepped back. "But she—" "I heard what she said. Step back. Now." Daniel's jaw worked, but he obeyed, moving to stand beside his mother, with his fists still clenched. Nathaniel turned to Priscilla, and Martha saw something in his expression that made even the formidable Mrs. Hawthorne take a small step backward. "You listen to me carefully, Priscilla, because I'm only going to say this once. Martha Calloway is going to be my wife. That makes her the mistress of Blackwood Ranch and one of the most influential women in this territory. You can accept that gracefully, or you can make an enemy of the man who owns the water rights. Your cattle depend on your choice." The color drained from Priscilla's face. "You wouldn't." "Try me." Silence stretched between them. Sarah Hawthorne looked like she might cry. Henderson had disappeared into his back room. Even Daniel had gone still. Finally, Priscilla inclined her head, the smallest possible gesture of acknowledgement. "Perhaps I spoke hastily. Welcome to Hawthorne Creek, Mrs. Calloway. I'm sure we'll become better acquainted in time." She swept out of the store, Sarah trailing behind her. Martha realized she'd stopped breathing. She forced herself to inhale, her legs trembling beneath her skirts. "I'm sorry." Daniel's voice was small. "I shouldn't have." "You shouldn't have." Nathaniel's voice was stern. "But I understand why you did. Your mother deserves defending. Just not like that. Not with threats. There are better ways. Like threatening to cut off their water." Something that might have been approval flickered in Nathaniel's eyes. "That's different. That's leverage. There's a difference between losing your temper and applying pressure strategically." Daniel considered this. "Will you teach me? If you're willing to learn." Martha watched the exchange with her heart in her throat. It was the first time Daniel had shown interest in anything Nathaniel offered. The first crack in the wall he'd built around himself. They completed their shopping and left town as the afternoon light began to fade. The sky had grown darker, heavy with the promise of more snow. "Storm coming," Nathaniel observed, urging the horses faster. "Need to get back before it hits." They made it to the ranch just as the first flakes began to fall. Within hours, the world had turned white, and howling wind driving snow against the windows with a sound like sand against glass. "Nobody leaves the house tonight," Nathaniel announced at supper. "This storm looks bad. Hank, make sure the hands are accounted for." "Already done, boss. Everyone's in the bunkhouse or the barn." Martha gathered her children close that evening, all of them crowded into the main parlor while the storm raged outside. Cookie had built up the fire until the room glowed with warmth, and the children had spread across furniture and floor, creating a nest of bodies and blankets. "Mama, tell a story." Hannah tugged at Martha's sleeve. "Tell about Papa." Martha felt the familiar ache in her chest. "Which Papa, sweetheart?" "First Papa, the one who could make animals from wood." "Ah." Martha pulled Hannah closer, aware of her other children leaning in to listen. Even Daniel, pretending to read in the corner, had gone still. "Your Papa Thomas was a man of many talents. He could look at a piece of wood and see the creature hiding inside it. He'd say, 'Martha, there's a rabbit in this oak, just have to let it out.'" "And he let them out?" Joey's eyes were wide. "He did. Carved them so fine you'd swear they could hop right off the shelf." "What happened to the animals?" Ruth asked quietly. "We don't have them anymore. Sold them, after he died. We needed the money more than we needed wooden rabbits." The fire crackled. Wind howled against the walls. "I remember the horse." Samuel's voice was rough. "He made me a horse for my 5th birthday. painted it brown with white spots. That's right. You carried that horse everywhere for 2 years. Wouldn't eat supper without it sitting beside your plate. What happened to it? The flood, when the creek rose, took a lot of things that year. Nathaniel had been sitting in the corner ostensibly reading but clearly listening. Martha caught his eye across the room and saw something there she couldn't name. I could try. His voice was quiet. Carving, I mean. I'm not skilled, but I know the basics. If the children wanted to learn, really. Joey bounced up. You'd teach us, if your mother approves. Martha nodded slowly, her throat tight with unexpected emotion. The storm raged for 2 days. By the morning of the second day, Joey had developed a cough. By that afternoon, the cough had become a fever. It's just a cold. Martha pressed her hand to her son's burning forehead. Children get fevers. But the fever climbed, and by nightfall Joey was barely conscious, his small body racked with shivers despite the blankets piled on top of him. He needs a doctor. Rebecca's voice was tight with fear. Mama, he's getting worse. The storm. I'll go. Nathaniel appeared in the doorway, already pulling on his coat. Doc Warren lives on the east side of town. 3-hour ride in good weather. You can't. Martha grabbed his arm. You can't see anything out there. You'll die. I know this land better than I know my own hands. I'll make it. Nathaniel. He turned to face her, and Martha saw the determination in his eyes. Something else, too. Fear. Not for himself, but for the boy lying in the bed behind her. He's 5 years old, Martha. He's got a future worth fighting for. I'm going. He was gone before she could argue further. The hours that followed were the longest of Martha's life. She sat beside Joey's bed, wiping his forehead with cool cloths, forcing water between his cracked lips, praying to a God she'd stopped believing in years ago. Her other children gathered outside the door, Rebecca keeping them calm, with a strength that made Martha's heart ache. Samuel had wanted to ride after Nathaniel, but Hank had stopped him. Boss knows what he's doing. Best thing you can do is stay here and be ready to help when he gets back. If he gets back, Martha thought. If either of them survives this. Near midnight, Joey's fever spiked. His small body convulsed, and Martha thought she might die herself from the terror of watching her child slip away. No. She gathered him close, her tears falling onto his hair. No, sweetheart, you stay with me. You stay right here. Mama's not done with you yet. Mama. Grace's voice came from the doorway. Martha looked up to find her silent daughter standing there, her face pale, but her eyes clear. Grace, honey, go back to bed. No. Grace walked forward. Her first voluntary movements toward anyone outside the family since Frank's death. She climbed onto the bed beside her brother and took his hand. Joey, you have to wake up. Who's going to count the horses if you don't wake up? Martha's breath caught. Mr. Blackwood promised. Grace's voice was stronger now. He promised you could count the horses. You can't break a promise, Joey. That's not fair. Joey's eyelids flickered. That's it, sweetheart. Martha leaned close. Come back to us. Come back. The front door crashed open downstairs. Footsteps pounded up the stairs, and then Nathaniel was there, snow-covered and half-frozen, with a small man in spectacles behind him. I'm Dr. Warren. The small man was already moving toward the bed, his hands surprisingly steady as he opened his bag. How long has the fever been this high? Hours, I don't know. Too long. The doctor worked quickly, examining Joey with practiced efficiency. Martha watched with her heart in her throat, one hand gripping Grace's shoulder, the other clutched in her own lap. It's pneumonia. The doctor pulled medicines from his bag. Caught early enough, I think. We need to bring the fever down and keep his lungs clear. Next 24 hours are critical. He gave Martha instructions, medicines to administer, positions to keep Joey, and signs to watch for. She absorbed it all with the focus of a woman who'd nursed children through illness before. I'll stay. The doctor looked at Nathaniel. Until the worst passes. Whatever you need, name your price. The ride through that storm was payment enough, Mr. Blackwood. I've never seen anyone make that journey in weather like this. You must care a great deal for this boy. Nathaniel's gaze moved to Martha, to Joey, to Grace still holding her brother's hand. I care for all of them, he said quietly. More than I expected to. The next 24 hours blurred together. Martha didn't sleep, didn't eat, barely moved from Joey's bedside. Nathaniel stayed too silent and watchful, ready to help whenever she asked. At some point in the long night, Grace fell asleep, curled against her brother's side. Martha tried to move her, but Nathaniel stopped her. Let her stay. She needs to be there when he wakes up. If he wakes up. When? Nathaniel's voice was firm. He's a Calloway. You said it yourself. Callaways don't break. Near dawn, Joey's fever broke. Martha felt it happen, the heat ebbing from his skin like a tide going out. His breathing eased, his face relaxed. Mama? His voice was thin, barely a whisper. I'm here, sweetheart. I'm right here. I had bad dreams. I know, but they're over now. You're safe. Is Mr. Blackwood here? Nathaniel moved closer to the bed. I'm here, son. Did you count the horses without me? Despite everything, despite the terror and the exhaustion and the overwhelming relief, Martha laughed. It came out broken and tear-soaked, but it was still a laugh. No, Nathaniel said, his own voice rough. I waited. Horses don't go anywhere. They'll be there when you're ready. Joey smiled weakly and closed his eyes. Martha looked at Nathaniel across her son's sleeping form. He looked terrible, exhausted, frostbitten, older than he'd seemed days ago. He'd ridden through a blizzard that could have killed him. For a child, he'd known less than a week. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you. I made a promise. I keep my word. This was more than a promise. Nathaniel was quiet for a moment. Then, Eleanor died in this room. Did you know that? Martha shook her head. Right there. He nodded toward the chair Martha had spent the night in. I held her hand and watched her slip away, and there wasn't a thing I could do to stop it. The baby, too. A girl. She never even opened her eyes. Nathaniel. When I saw Joey lying there fighting that fever, I thought... He stopped, his jaw working. I thought I couldn't watch another child die in this house. I couldn't survive it. So I went. Not because I'm brave or noble or any of that nonsense. Because I was terrified of what would happen if I didn't. Martha rose from the bed carefully, not wanting to wake Joey or Grace. She crossed to where Nathaniel stood and did something she hadn't done in years. She reached out and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, strong and cold and trembling slightly. Thank you, she said again. Not just for Joey, for all of us, for seeing us when no one else would. Martha. I know this started as a practical arrangement. I know you chose me for logical reasons. But this, what you did tonight, that wasn't practical. That was something else. He looked at their joined hands, then at her face. I haven't cared about anything in 6 years, he said slowly. I thought that part of me died with Eleanor, but these past few days, watching your children, watching you. He paused. I don't know what this is. I don't know what to call it, but it's not practical anymore. No, Martha agreed. It's not. They stood like that as dawn broke, outside, hands clasped, watching Joey sleep with Grace curled beside him. And Martha thought that maybe, just maybe, she was beginning to understand what it felt like to stop surviving and start living again. Joey's recovery was slow but steady. Within 3 days, he was sitting up and demanding to know when he could count the horses. Within a week, he was driving Cookie to distraction by following him around the kitchen, asking questions about everything. Boy asks more questions than a lawyer, Cookie grumbled, but Martha noticed he always answered. The near loss of her son had shifted something in the household. The children moved differently now, staying closer together, touching more often. Even Daniel had softened, checking on Joey multiple times a day with an awkwardness that broke Martha's heart. And Nathaniel. Nathaniel had changed too. He'd always been present, always watching, always ready to help when needed. But after that night, after the blizzard ride and the fever breaking at dawn, he'd become something else, something closer. "The courtship weekend's tomorrow," he said one evening, finding Martha alone in the kitchen after supper. Cookie had retired to his quarters, and the children were scattered through the house in their various evening routines. Martha looked up from the mending in her lap. "I know. I need to ask you something. You already know my answer. I know what you told me on the platform, but things have changed since then." He pulled out a chair and sat across from her, closer than he'd ever sat before. "I need to know if they've changed for you, too." Martha set down her sewing. "What do you mean?" "When you agreed to this arrangement, you were desperate. You had 9 children and nowhere to go. You said yes because you had no choice. But now—" He paused, seeming to struggle with words. "Now you've seen this place. Seen me. Seen what this life would actually be. I need to know if you're still saying yes because you have to, or because you want to." The question hung between them, heavy with implications Martha hadn't allowed herself to examine too closely. "I've been married twice," she said slowly. "Both times I did it because I had to, for survival, for my children. I never asked myself what I wanted because wanting things was a luxury I couldn't afford. And now you're asking me to want something, to choose something, and I don't—" Her voice caught. "I don't know if I remember how." Nathaniel reached across the table and took her hand. The gesture was becoming familiar now, the weight of his fingers laced through hers. "Then let me ask a different question. When you think about leaving here tomorrow, taking your children and going somewhere else, what do you feel?" Martha closed her eyes. She imagined packing their few possessions, loading the children into a wagon, riding away from this house with its warm kitchen and too many bedrooms. Riding away from Cookie and Clara and Hank. Riding away from Nathaniel. Something in her chest clenched so hard she couldn't breathe. "I feel sick," she whispered. "I feel like I'd be tearing something out of myself." That's wanting, Martha. That's what wanting feels like when you've forgotten you're allowed to do it. She opened her eyes to find him watching her with an intensity that made her skin warm. "Tomorrow night," he said, "after supper, I'm going to ask you properly, in front of your children. They deserve to be part of this decision, and you deserve a proposal that isn't made on a frozen platform in front of strangers." "Nathaniel, let me finish. If your answer is still yes, we'll be married the following morning. Reverend Whitfield can come to the ranch. Small ceremony, just family." He squeezed her hand. "But if your answer is no, if you've decided this isn't what you want after all, I'll give you enough money to start over anywhere you choose. No strings, no obligations. That's my promise." Martha studied his face, looking for the trick, the hidden angle. She'd been searching for it since the day he chose her on that platform, and she still hadn't found it. "Why?" The question came out before she could stop it. "Why are you so good to us?" "Because you deserve it. Because your children deserve it. Because for 6 years I've been living in a house full of ghosts, and then you walked in with 9 children and more life than I knew what to do with." His voice roughened. "Because when I rode through that blizzard to get the doctor, I realized I wasn't just doing it for Joey. I was doing it for you. I was doing it because the thought of seeing you lose another child was unbearable." Martha felt tears burning behind her eyes. She'd trained herself not to cry years ago, but the training was failing her now. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "I don't know how to be a wife to someone who actually—" She stopped, unable to finish. "Someone who actually cares about you." She nodded. "Then we'll figure it out together. Same way we've been figuring out everything else, one day at a time." He rose, still holding her hand, and lifted it to his lips. The kiss was gentle, barely more than a brush of warmth against her knuckles, but it sent something electric through her entire body. "Tomorrow night," he said. "Be ready." He left her alone in the kitchen, with her mending forgotten in her lap, and her heart beating faster than it had in years. The next morning, Martha woke to find Ruth sitting on the edge of her bed, watching her with serious eyes. "Mama, can I ask you something?" Martha sat up, pushing hair out of her face. "Of course, sweetheart." "Mr. Blackwood has a library. Did you know that—" "I knew there were books in the study. Not just those, there's a whole room, upstairs at the end of the hall. The door was locked, but Clara gave me the key." Ruth's eyes were shining. "Mama, there are hundreds of books, maybe thousands, more books than I've ever seen in my whole life." Martha felt something twist in her chest. Her quiet daughter, her dreamer, who'd wanted to be a teacher since she was old enough to know what teachers were. And Mr. Blackwood said— Ruth stopped suddenly, uncertain. "What did he say?" "He said if you marry him, he'll send me to school. A real school, in Denver. There's an academy there for girls who want to be teachers. He said he'd pay for everything." The tears Martha had held back last night threatened to spill over now. He said every child deserves to chase their dreams and being poor shouldn't stop them." Ruth's voice trembled. "Mama, I never told anyone about wanting to be a teacher. Not anyone except you." "How did he know?" "Because he pays attention," Martha whispered. "Because he sees us." Ruth threw her arms around her mother, and for a long moment they held each other while Martha processed what Nathaniel had done. Not just offering security, not just providing a home, but seeing her children as individuals with dreams and hopes worth nurturing. "Do you want to marry him, Mama?" Ruth's voice was muffled against Martha's shoulder. "I think I do, sweetheart. I think I really do." "Good, because I think he might actually be wonderful." The day passed in strange suspension. Martha went through the motions of household management, but her mind kept drifting to the evening ahead, to the proposal that would change everything. After lunch, she found herself drawn to the parlor, to the piano that had sat silent since her arrival. Eleanor's piano, the instrument that had kept a lonely woman sane in the wilderness. Martha sat on the bench and let her fingers rest on the keys. She hadn't played in 20 years, hadn't touched a piano since her father sold theirs to pay gambling debts when she was 18. Slowly, hesitantly, she pressed a key, then another. The notes hung in the air, pure and clear. "You can play if you want." She turned to find Nathaniel in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "I don't remember how. It's been too long." "Your fingers might remember even if your mind doesn't. Try." Martha turned back to the keys. She closed her eyes, reaching for memories buried so deep she'd thought they were lost forever. Her mother's hands guiding hers, the smell of wood polish and candle wax, the feeling of music flowing through her body like water. She began to play. The melody was simple, a folk song her mother had taught her decades ago. Her fingers stumbled at first, missing notes, hitting wrong keys. But slowly, painfully, the music began to emerge. Imperfect, broken, but music nonetheless. When she finished, her face was wet with tears she didn't remember shedding. "That was beautiful." Nathaniel moved closer, his footsteps soft on the wooden floor. "It was terrible. I missed half the notes." "It was you trying something that scared you. That's always beautiful." He sat beside her on the bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Eleanor used to play every evening. After she died, I couldn't bear to hear anyone else touch these keys. I thought I'd have to sell it or give it away. But you didn't." "No. I kept thinking maybe someday there'd be someone else who needed it. Someone who'd lost their music and needed to find it again." He looked at her, his blue eyes soft. "I think I was waiting for you, Martha. I just didn't know it." Before she could respond, the front door burst open, and Daniel's voice echoed through the house. "Help, someone help!" Martha was on her feet before she consciously decided to move, racing toward the sound of her son's voice, She found him in the entryway supporting Samuel, who was clutching his left arm against his chest. Blood seeped through his fingers. "What happened?" Martha grabbed for her eldest, her hands finding the wound automatically. "Horse spooked. Threw him against the fence. I think his arm is broken." Daniel's voice was steady, but his face was white. I didn't know what to do." "You did exactly right. You got him here." Martha guided Samuel toward a chair. "Nathaniel, I need—" But Nathaniel was already moving, shouting for Hank, for Clara, for anyone who could help. Within minutes, the house was organized chaos. Clara appeared with bandages and hot water. Hank rode for the doctor. Cookie produced whiskey for the pain. Through it all, Daniel stood frozen in the corner, watching his brother with an expression that broke Martha's heart. "He saved me." Samuel's voice was strained with pain. "The horse, it was coming at me." Daniel grabbed the reins and pulled it away. "He saved my life, Ma." Martha looked at her middle son, at the boy who'd been so angry for so long, who'd built walls so high no one could climb them. "Daniel." "I just reacted." His voice was barely audible. "I saw the horse and I couldn't let him." He stopped, his face crumbling. "I couldn't lose another person. I can't do it again." Something in Martha shattered. She crossed the room and pulled Daniel into her arms, holding him as the sobs tore through him. All the anger, all the fear, all the grief he'd been carrying since his stepfather died, it all came pouring out in her embrace. "You didn't lose him," she murmured against his hair. "You saved him. Do you understand that? You saved your brother." "I was so scared." The words came out broken, a child's confession. "I'm always so scared, Mama. Every day I wake up scared that something else is going to go wrong, that we're going to lose everything again." "I know, sweetheart. I know. I've been scared too. But you don't show it. That doesn't mean it's not there." Nathaniel appeared beside them, his hand coming to rest on Daniel's shoulder. The boy tensed for a moment, then slowly relaxed. "You did good today," Nathaniel said quietly. "You kept your head in a crisis. You got your brother to safety. That's not nothing, Daniel. That's everything." Daniel lifted his head, his face tear-streaked and raw. "I still don't trust you." "I know. I want to. I don't know how anymore." "Then don't trust me." Nathaniel's voice was steady. "Trust what you see. Trust what you experience. Trust that every day I'm going to try to earn the trust you can't give me yet. That's all I'm asking. Just give me the chance to prove myself." Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. "Okay, I can do that." The doctor arrived an hour later, confirming that Samuel's arm was broken, but would heal cleanly. By evening, Samuel was settled in bed with his arm splinted and his younger siblings taking turns keeping him company. Martha found herself in the parlor again, watching the fire burn low, while she tried to process everything that had happened. The day had been too much. Too many emotions, too many revelations, too many walls coming down. "Mama!" Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Blackwood sent me to get you. He says everyone's gathering in the dining room." Now. Martha rose on unsteady legs. This was it. The proposal she'd been both dreading and anticipating all day. The dining room was warm and bright candles glowing on every surface. Her children were arranged around the room, even Samuel, who'd insisted on being helped downstairs for this. Nathaniel stood at the head of the table, looking more nervous than Martha had ever seen him. "I had a whole speech prepared," he said as Martha entered, "about practical arrangements and mutual benefit, and all the logical reasons this marriage makes sense. But after today, after everything, I don't think logic is what any of us need." He moved toward her, and Martha saw that his hands were trembling slightly. "Martha Calloway, when I rode to that platform last week, I was looking for a partner. Someone to help me run this ranch, manage this household, fill this house with something other than silence and memories." He took her hands in his. "I found so much more than I was looking for." Tears burned in Martha's eyes. "I found a woman who stands her ground against anything the world throws at her. I found children who love each other fiercely and protect each other absolutely. I found a family, a real family, something I thought I'd never have again." He reached into his pocket and produced a ring, simple gold with a small sapphire that caught the candlelight. "This was my grandmother's. She wore it for 53 years of marriage. She used to say that the secret to a good marriage wasn't love at first sight. It was choosing to love someone every single day, even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard." He dropped to one knee, and Martha heard one of the girls gasp. "Martha Ann Calloway, I'm not offering you a fairy tale. I'm offering you hard work and early mornings, and a man who doesn't know the right words half the time. But I'm also offering you a home where you and your children will never be hungry or cold or unwanted again. I'm offering you partnership, real partnership with someone who sees you, all of you, and thinks you're the most extraordinary woman he's ever met." He looked up at her, his blue eyes bright with emotion. "Will you marry me? Not because you have to. Not because there's no other choice. But because you want to. Because maybe, just maybe, you've started to feel something for this stubborn rancher who doesn't know when to quit." Martha's throat was so tight she couldn't speak. She looked around the room at her children, at Samuel with his splinted arm, at Rebecca, wiping tears from her cheeks, at Ruth and Hannah, holding hands, at Daniel, standing apart, but watching intently, at Eli and Joey, barely containing their excitement, at Grace holding baby Lily with quiet determination. And at the end, at the child who hadn't spoken to a stranger in 2 years, who'd broken her silence to call her brother back from fever's edge. "Grace," Martha said softly, "what do you think?" Every head in the room turned toward the 7-year-old. Grace studied Nathaniel for a long moment, her small face serious. Then she walked forward, reached out, and took his free hand. "You're not like the other papas," she said, her voice rusty from disuse. "The other papas didn't stay. But you rode through the storm. You came back." Nathaniel's composure cracked. Martha saw tears slide down his weathered cheeks as he squeezed Grace's small hand. "I'll always come back," he said roughly. "I promise." Grace nodded, apparently satisfied. She looked at Martha. "I think we should keep him, Mama." The room erupted. Rebecca laughed through her tears. Joey cheered. Even Daniel's face softened into something that might have been a smile. Martha knelt down until she was at Nathaniel's level. She took his face in her hands, this man who had seen her when she was invisible, who had chosen her children as his own, who had ridden through blizzards and faced down fever, and offered her something she'd stopped believing in. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you. Not because I have to, because I want to. Because somewhere in the past week I started wanting things again. And the thing I want most is this family, this home, you." Nathaniel pulled her into his arms, and around them, 9 children erupted into chaos and joy. "Does this mean I can finally count the horses?" Joey demanded. "Tomorrow." Nathaniel promised, his voice muffled against Martha's hair. "Tomorrow you can count every single one." "And I can go to school in Denver," Ruth asked, "if your mother agrees. And we can stay here forever." Hannah's voice was small, but hopeful. "Forever." Daniel moved closer, his expression still guarded, but his walls visibly lower. "I still don't fully trust you." "I know." Nathaniel released Martha enough to look at her son. "But you will. I'm going to earn it, Daniel, every single day." Daniel extended his hand. Nathaniel took it. "Welcome to the family, I guess," Daniel said. "Thank you for letting me in." Later, after the children had finally been herded to bed and the house had settled into peaceful quiet, Martha found Nathaniel on the front porch, looking out at the snow-covered valley beneath a sky full of stars. "Having second thoughts?" she asked, moving to stand beside him. "About you never." He pulled her close, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. "I was just thinking about Eleanor." Martha tensed slightly. "Not like that." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "I was thinking about how she'd feel about all this. About you and the children in this house being full of life again." What do you think she'd say? I think she'd say it's about damn time I stopped being a stubborn fool. His voice was soft. I think she'd like you, Martha. I think she'd be glad you're here. I hope so. I don't want to replace her. You're not replacing anyone. You're creating something new. That's different. He turned to face her, tilting her chin up with gentle fingers. Martha, I need to tell you something. What? I didn't plan to feel this way. When I chose you on that platform, I was thinking with my head. Practical considerations. Strategic decisions. But somewhere along the way, watching you with your children, seeing you face down Priscilla Hawthorne, watching you sit by Joey's bed all night somewhere along the way, it stopped being practical. Martha's heart hammered. What is it now? I don't know the word for it. I've been trying to find it all day. It's not quite love that feels too simple. It's bigger than that. It's wanting to be there every time something goes wrong. Wanting to see your face first thing in the morning. Wanting to build something together that neither of us could build alone. He kissed her, then soft and gentle and full of promise. Maybe there isn't a word for it, Martha whispered when they finally broke apart. Maybe we just have to live it instead. I can do that. Nathaniel rested his forehead against hers. I can definitely do that. They stood together in the cold night air, watching their breath mist and mingle, and Martha thought about all the roads that had led her here. 2 dead husbands, 9 children, 6 rejections, a platform in a blizzard, and somehow, impossibly miraculously, a home. The wedding's tomorrow, she said finally. We should probably get some sleep. Probably. But neither of them moved. Nathaniel. Thank you. For seeing me. For seeing all of us. Thank you for being worth seeing. Martha smiled against his shoulder. Tomorrow she would become Martha Blackwood. Tomorrow her children would have a father again. Tomorrow everything would change. But tonight, standing in the arms of a man who'd chosen her when no one else would, she let herself feel something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. Morning came too quickly. Martha woke before dawn, her heart already racing with the knowledge of what this day would bring. She lay still for a moment, listening to the quiet sounds of the house settling around her, and tried to remember the last time she'd felt anything like this strange mixture of terror and joy. She couldn't. Mama! Rebecca's voice came soft through the door. Are you awake? Come in, sweetheart. Rebecca slipped inside, already dressed, her hair pinned back in a way that made her look older than her 17 years. In her arms, she carried something white, something that caught the pale morning light. Clara found it in one of the trunks upstairs. She said Mrs. Blackwood Eleanor never wore it. It was meant for her, but she died before spring came. Rebecca laid the dress across the bed. Clara thought maybe you could use it, if you wanted. Martha touched the fabric, fine cotton delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Simple but beautiful. The kind of dress a woman would choose for a hopeful beginning. It's not bad luck, Martha asked quietly. Wearing a dead woman's dress on my wedding day. Clara said Eleanor would have wanted someone to wear it. She said Eleanor hated waste. Martha lifted the dress, holding it against herself. It would fit perhaps a little loose, but nothing that couldn't be managed. Help me get ready. Rebecca's face broke into a smile. I thought you'd never ask. The next hour passed in a blur of buttons and pins and carefully arranged hair. Ruth and Hannah joined them, the 3 girls fussing over Martha like she was a doll to be dressed. Even Grace came sitting quietly on the bed and watching with her solemn eyes. You look beautiful, Mama, Hannah breathed when they finally stepped back to admire their work. Martha looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. She'd been pretty once before 2 marriages and 9 children, and years of struggle had worn her down to bone and sinew. But today, in Eleanor's dress, with her hair swept up and her daughter's love surrounding her, she looked almost young again. I looked terrified, she corrected. That's normal. Rebecca squeezed her hand. Every bride is terrified. Were you terrified when you married Papa? Ruth asked. Martha considered the question. I was 17 when I married your father. I was so young I didn't know enough to be scared. I just knew I loved him, and he loved me, and that was supposed to be enough. Was it? For a while. Until it wasn't. She turned from the mirror to face her daughters. Marriage is hard, girls. Even good marriage. It takes work every single day. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Is this going to be a good marriage? Hannah's voice was small. Martha thought about Nathaniel, about the way he'd ridden through a blizzard for Joey, about the way he'd looked at her last night when she said yes, about the way he really saw her in a way no one ever had before. I think it might be, she said softly. I think it really might be. Reverend Whitfield arrived at 10 o'clock, a kind-faced man with gentle eyes who'd known Nathaniel for 20 years. He greeted Martha warmly, asking about her children by name, remembering details Nathaniel must have shared. He talks about you constantly, the Reverend confided. In all the years I knew him with Eleanor, I never saw him like this. Nervous, hopeful, alive again. He's a good man. The best man I know, though, don't tell him I said so. His ego doesn't need the help. The ceremony was held in the parlor near Eleanor's piano. Cookie had filled the room with candles and the last of the winter greenery, creating something warm and intimate, despite the snow still falling outside. Martha's children arranged themselves in a half circle, the older ones standing, the younger ones sitting on cushions Clara had provided. Samuel was there despite his broken arm, propped in a chair with Joey beside him. Daniel stood slightly apart, still guarded but present. Ruth held hands with Hannah. Grace held baby Lily, who gurgled happily, oblivious to the significance of the moment. And Nathaniel waited at the front wearing a dark suit Martha had never seen, his silver-touched hair combed back, his blue eyes fixed on the doorway where she would appear. Ready, Mama? Eli asked, bouncing on his toes with barely contained excitement. He'd been given the honor of walking her down the makeshift aisle. Ready? Martha took her 11-year-old's arm and stepped into the doorway. The room went silent. Every face turned toward her. But Martha only saw one face, only registered one expression, only cared about one person's reaction. Nathaniel's eyes widened. His breath caught visibly. And then he smiled, a real smile, the kind that transformed his entire face from stern to almost beautiful. Wow, Joey whispered loudly. Mama looks like a princess. Someone shushed him, but Martha barely heard. She was walking forward one step at a time, her son's arm steady beneath her hand, her heart beating so hard she could feel it in her throat. When she reached Nathaniel, he took her hands in his. His fingers were trembling. You came, he murmured, too quiet for anyone else to hear. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought maybe you'd come to your senses overnight. Realize you could do better than a stubborn old rancher with more land than conversation skills. I happen to like stubborn old ranchers. Martha squeezed his hands. Especially ones who ride through blizzards for sick little boys. Reverend Whitfield cleared his throat gently. Shall we begin? The ceremony was simple. Traditional vows spoken in steady voices. Rings exchanged, Nathaniel's grandmother's sapphire for Martha, a plain gold band for him. Promises made before God and family to honor, cherish, and keep each other through whatever came. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Nathaniel cupped Martha's face in his hands with a tenderness that made her eyes sting. Hello, Mrs. Blackwood, he whispered. Hello, husband. He kissed her, then soft and sweet and full of promise. Around them, children cheered and clapped, and Cookie let out a whoop that seemed entirely out of character. Does this mean we can eat now? Joey demanded. Cookie said there would be cake. There is cake. Nathaniel released Martha reluctantly. Enough cake for an army, which is good because apparently I've married into one. The celebration that followed was unlike anything Martha had experienced. Cookie had outdone himself producing a feast that left everyone groaning with satisfaction. Clara had decorated the dining room with ribbons and candles. Even Hank had dressed up, his weathered face cracked in a smile as he raised a toast to the new couple. To Nate and Martha, may your marriage be as strong as Wyoming winters and as warm as summer sunshine. And may your children, all 11 of them, now give you exactly as much trouble as you deserve. 11? Joey frowned, counting on his fingers. There's only 9 of us. 11, including Nate and Martha, Hank explained. Hank, because they're all each other's children now. That's what family means. Joey considered this, then nodded seriously. Okay, that makes sense. As the afternoon wore on, Martha found herself pulled aside by each of her children in turn. Samuel, his good arm hugging her tight, promising to make Nathaniel proud. Rebecca, tears streaming down her face, saying she'd never seen Martha look so happy. Ruth, already dreaming about Denver, thanking her mother for giving her a future. Eli asking if this meant he could call Nathaniel Pa like a real son. Only if you want to, Martha told him. And only when you're ready. Daniel was the last. He approached her as the party was winding down, his expression unreadable. You love him. It wasn't a question. I'm starting to, Martha admitted. It's different than what I felt for your father, quieter, slower, but I think it might be just as real. And he loves you. He's learning to. We both are. Daniel was quiet for a long moment. Then, I'm glad you're happy, Mama. You deserve it. So do you, sweetheart. All of you deserve happiness. Maybe. He glanced toward where Nathaniel was teaching Joey and Hannah some kind of card game, his deep voice patient, as he explained the rules. Maybe I'll find it here. I hope so. That evening, after the children had finally been put to bed and the house had settled into quiet, Martha found herself standing in the doorway of what was now her bedroom. Their bedroom. Nathaniel appeared behind her, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. Nervous. Terrified. We don't have to. I know. She turned to face him. But I want to. I just don't know if I remember how to be a wife in that way. My marriages before were about duty, obligation. This feels different. It is different. He drew her inside, closing the door behind them. Martha, I'm not expecting anything tonight except honesty. We figure this out together, same as everything else. If you need time, I'll wait. If you need space, I'll give it. But if you want me, I want you. The words came out stronger than she expected. I'm scared and nervous, and I don't know what I'm doing, but I know I want you. I know I want this. Nathaniel pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her like she was something precious. Then we'll be scared together, he murmured against her hair. We'll figure it out together. That's what marriage is supposed to be. What followed was awkward and tender, and nothing like the dutiful couplings Martha remembered from her previous marriages. Nathaniel was patient where Thomas had been hasty, gentle where Frank had been perfunctory. He seemed genuinely interested in her pleasure, her comfort, her experience. And when it was over, when they lay tangled together in the darkness, Martha found herself crying for reasons she couldn't fully explain. Did I hurt you? Nathaniel's voice was sharp with concern. No, it's not that. She wiped at her face. It's just I didn't know it could be like that. I didn't know I was allowed to feel like that. Like what? Wanted. Not just needed or useful or necessary. Actually wanted. Nathaniel pulled her closer, pressing his lips to her temple. Get used to it. I plan to want you for a very long time. The weeks that followed were a study in adjustment. 9 children, plus 2 adults, plus a household staff, plus 30 ranch hands, meant chaos was simply the natural state of things. Martha threw herself into learning, into managing, into becoming the mistress of Blackwood Ranch, in fact, as well as name. Cookie became her teacher in the kitchen, showing her the rhythms of feeding an operation this size. Clara taught her about the household accounts, the supply orders, the thousand small details that kept everything running. Hank introduced her to the workings of the ranch itself, the seasonal patterns, the cattle drives, the horse breeding program that was Nathaniel's particular pride. And the children settled in, each finding their place. Samuel worked alongside the hands, his natural leadership emerging as his arm healed. Rebecca took over much of the household management, freeing Martha for other duties. Daniel surprised everyone by discovering a talent for numbers, spending hours in Nathaniel's office, learning the business side of ranching. Ruth devoured books from the library, preparing for the school in Denver she'd start attending in the fall. Eli and Joey became inseparable from the horses, spending every spare moment in the stables. Hannah appointed herself assistant to Cookie, learning recipes and techniques with serious dedication. Grace remained quiet, but she smiled more often now, and occasionally she would seek out Nathaniel, specifically sitting beside him in companionable silence while he worked. And baby Lily took her first steps on a March morning, toddling across the parlor floor into Nathaniel's waiting arms, while the entire family cheered. Spring came slowly to Wyoming snow, giving way to mud, giving way to the first tentative green shoots. With it came visitors from town, including Priscilla Hawthorne, who arrived one afternoon with a peace offering in the form of seedlings for Martha's garden. "I owe you an apology," Priscilla said stiffly, standing in the Blackwood parlor with the same rigid posture she'd worn at their first meeting. "I was unkind to you, cruel even. It was wrong." "What changed your mind?" Priscilla's expression flickered. "My niece Sarah. She told me she was relieved Nathaniel chose you instead of her. Said she'd been terrified of the responsibility of moving out here, of trying to fill Eleanor's shoes. She said watching you manage this household, these children, this life, it made her realize she wasn't ready for any of it. And that made you see me differently. It made me see myself differently." Priscilla sighed. "I was so focused on what I wanted for Sarah that I never asked what she wanted for herself. You did ask. You asked your children. You included them in the decision. That's not something I would have thought to do." Martha accepted the seedlings, and after a long moment invited Priscilla to stay for tea. It wasn't friendship, not yet, but it was a beginning. The summer brought new challenges. A drought threatened the cattle. A fire swept through the north pasture. Samuel took a bad fall from a horse and spent 2 weeks in bed recovering. Through it all, Martha and Nathaniel worked side by side, facing each crisis as partners, as equals. "I couldn't do this without you," Nathaniel told her one night after a particularly brutal day of drought management. "I don't know how I ever did it alone." "You weren't alone. You had Hank, Cookie, Clara." "That's not the same. They work for me. You're with me." He pulled her close. "There's a difference." On a quiet evening in late August, with the children scattered through the house in their various pursuits and the ranch finally settling into routine, Nathaniel found Martha sitting by Eleanor's grave on the North Hill. "I thought I'd find you here," he said, lowering himself to sit beside her. "I hope you don't mind. I know this is your place." "It's our place now. Everything here is ours." He looked at the simple headstone, at the name carved into weather-worn marble. "What were you thinking about?" "About how strange life is. How the worst things lead to unexpected places." Martha touched the stone gently. "I was thanking her." "For what?" "For making you into the man you are. For giving you the capacity to love again even after losing her. For the piano and the library and the house that was waiting for a family to fill it." Nathaniel's throat worked. "She would have liked you." "You said that before." "I mean it more now." He took Martha's hand. "Martha, I need to tell you something. Something I've been trying to figure out how to say for months." Her heart stuttered. "What is it?" "When we got married, I said I didn't know the word for what I felt. That it was bigger than love, different than love, something I couldn't name." He turned to face her, his blue eyes bright in the evening light. "I know the word now." "What is it?" "Home." His voice was rough. "You're my home, Martha. You and the children. Everywhere I go, Everything I do, it all comes back to you. You're my anchor, my compass, my reason for getting up in the morning. I've had houses, I've had land. I've had success and wealth and everything money can buy. But I never had a home until you walked into my life. Martha felt tears sliding down her cheeks. She didn't try to stop them. I love you, Nathaniel said. Not because I need you, or because you're useful, or because marriage requires it. I love you because you're brave and stubborn and fiercer than anyone I've ever known. I love you because you make me laugh and challenge me and refuse to let me be less than my best. I love you because you gave me a family when I thought I'd never have one again. He pulled her close, and Martha buried her face against his shoulder. I love you too, she whispered. I've been afraid to say it, afraid that speaking it out loud would make it disappear. But I love you, Nathaniel. I love this life. I love who I'm becoming with you. They held each other as the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Behind them, the ranch house glowed with lamplight, the sounds of children's voices drifting through the evening air. When they finally walked back to the house hand in hand, they found Daniel waiting on the porch. Everything all right? Martha asked immediately, scanning for signs of trouble. Everything's fine. Daniel shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. I wanted to say something. We're listening. Daniel took a deep breath. When we first came here, I said I didn't trust you, that I couldn't trust any man after what happened with my father and my stepfather. I said I'd try to give you a chance, but I didn't really mean it. I was just waiting for you to fail, waiting for you to prove you were like everyone else. He looked at Nathaniel, his young face serious. But you didn't fail. You didn't give up on any of us even when we made it hard. You rode through a blizzard for Joey. You taught Samuel everything you know about ranching. You're sending Ruth to school in Denver. You treat my mother like she's actually worth something, not just another burden to carry. Daniel's voice cracked slightly. I watched my father die when I was 11. I watched my stepfather die when I was 13. I swore I'd never let myself care about another man, because caring meant losing, and I couldn't survive losing anyone else. Daniel. Nathaniel started. Let me finish. Daniel squared his shoulders. I was wrong. Not about caring being risky, it is, but being too scared to care is worse. It's lonely and cold, and it makes you hard in all the wrong places. He stepped forward, extending his hand. I'd like to start calling you Pa, if that's all right. Not because I've forgotten my real father, I'll never forget him, but because you've earned it, because you've proven you're staying, because... His voice broke completely. Because I want a father again. I want a family. I want to stop being so angry all the time. Nathaniel didn't take his hand. Instead, he pulled Daniel into a fierce embrace, the kind Martha had seen him give Joey and Eli, the kind he'd been holding back from her guarded middle son. I'd be honored, Nathaniel said roughly. I'd be so honored, son. Martha watched her son finally let go. Finally allow himself to be held. Finally accept the family that had been waiting patiently for him to be ready. This, she thought. This is what healing looks like. This is what hope looks like. This is what second chances look like. That night, long after the children were asleep and the house had grown quiet, Martha sat by the bedroom window, watching the stars spread across the Wyoming sky. Nathaniel came to stand behind her, his arms wrapping around her waist. What are you thinking about? About how I got here. About 6 men who rejected me and a 7th who rode through a blizzard to choose me. About 9 children who needed a father and found one in the most unexpected place. Regrets. Not a single one. She leaned back against him. I spent so many years just surviving, putting one foot in front of the other because the alternative was giving up. I'd forgotten that life could be more than survival, that it could be joy and love and belonging. And now I'm living, really living. For the first time since I was 17 years old, and naive enough to think love conquered everything. She turned in his arms to face him. Love doesn't conquer everything. But love, plus partnership, plus stubborn refusal to give up, that combination might actually be unstoppable. Nathaniel kissed her forehead. I like those odds. So do I. 5 years later, on a spring morning that smelled of new grass and possibility, Martha stood on the porch of Blackwood Ranch and watched her family spread across the valley. Samuel, 24, now rode alongside the hands he'd earned the respect of through years of hard work. Rebecca had married a young rancher from the neighboring county and was expecting her first child. Daniel managed the ranch's finances with a skill that had doubled their profits. Ruth was teaching at the school in Denver, living her dream. Eli and Joey worked the stables, their childhood fascination with horses having grown into genuine expertise. Hannah had taken over Cookie's kitchen when the old man finally retired, feeding the ranch with the same fierce dedication he'd shown. Grace, no longer silent, taught piano lessons in town, using Eleanor's beloved instrument to bring music to children who might otherwise never have learned. And baby Lily, not a baby anymore, raced across the yard, chasing chickens, while Nathaniel pretended to be too slow to catch her. Martha watched it all with a full heart. 6 rejections had led her here. 6 men who'd looked at her children and seen burdens instead of blessings. 6 closed doors that had seemed like endings, but had actually been clearings, pushing her forward toward the one door that would open. She thought about the woman she'd been on that frozen platform, desperate and invisible, clinging to dignity by her fingernails. That woman had believed she was broken beyond repair. That woman had stopped dreaming because dreams only led to disappointment. That woman had been wrong. Penny for your thoughts. Nathaniel climbed the porch steps, slightly breathless from chasing Lily, and settled into the chair beside her. Just thinking about how far we've come. Long way from a frozen platform. Long way from a lonely rancher who talked to his dead wife's portrait. Nathaniel laughed, the sound easy and warm. I still talk to her sometimes. But now I tell her about you. About the children. About how right she was when she said I needed to stop hiding from life. She said that, in a dream, right before I went to that bride selection, she told me to stop being a coward and go find my future. He took Martha's hand, lacing their fingers together. Turns out my future was standing at the end of a platform with 9 children and more courage than anyone I'd ever met. Martha leaned her head against his shoulder. Best decision you ever made. Best decision we ever made. They sat together as the morning unfolded, watching their family grow and thrive, and become everything Martha had never dared hope for. She thought about all the roads that had led here, all the pain and loss and struggle, all the times she'd wanted to give up and hadn't. She'd spent 38 years learning that the world was hard, that love faded, that nothing good lasted, and then she'd learned something different. She'd learned that the hardest lives could still find softness, that hearts broken by loss could break open to love again, that a woman rejected 6 times could still be chosen, still be wanted, still be seen as exactly what someone needed. She'd learned that family wasn't just blood. It was choice. It was showing up. It was riding through blizzards and sitting by sick beds and refusing to give up even when giving up would have been easier. She'd learned that she wasn't broken at all. She was a survivor, a mother, a partner, a wife. She was Martha Ann Blackwood, and she was home.